YouTubers, welcome to my basement orchid room. This is where I keep my orchids in the winter time because it snows here. I have a couple of lights set up, and there's a vent here so that it stays relatively warm, warmer than the outside anyway. We do get snow here in the wintertime. So I wanted to make a video on growing keikis and baby orchids. I've kept orchids for over 10 years, and I've tried to grow keikis before but have failed. They usually dry up and don't grow any roots, and then they just die. This past year I tried a new method, and at least they are not dying, and they're growing new pseudobulbs. So my keikis, as you can see, are Dendrobium nobilis, and I actually have a couple of Phalaenopsis here in the right corner here, as you can see. And then a year ago I actually accidentally bought a whole bunch of Potinara seedlings. There's one over here. I have about 25 of those, and this method seemed to work for those as well. So I thought I would share. This is still a kind of practice run. Well, not really practice run, I guess, because I really hope this works. But you know, I am trying out this method. I'm sure other people have done it other ways, but I've not been able to find much on growing keikis and how people successfully grow them. People mention them here and there, but they actually don't go into it in depth. So anyway, I thought I would share what I've found so far in the hopes that maybe other people can learn from what I've done. So I kind of got this idea from seeing people grow orchids in semi-water culture, and then also, you know, just with the idea that you know, in the wild and in greenhouses and in methods like spag and bag, you know, the idea is to keep the air moist and to keep the medium moist so that the orchids can grow without losing a lot of water or a lot of moisture, so that they can, it gives them the chance to grow without drying out and dying. So as you can see here, these are little plastic shot glasses, or not glasses, they're plastic, little shot plastic cups from the grocery store that I have put holes in. I learned this method from Miss Orchid Girl. She's got a bunch of great videos on YouTube. It's a little dark over here. Let's see. Here we go. So I put a bunch of holes in the cup so that it gets good aeration, so the orchid's roots get air. And then on the bottom, I leave the bottom closed so that there's just a small, so that when I water them, a lot of the water drains from the cup, but there's a small amount of water that stays in the bottom. And this kind of gets wicked up into the medium up here, and it keeps the medium moist and allows the orchid from to have some moisture with, so that it doesn't dry out. So as you can see, this is one that I actually just put in here probably a couple of weeks ago. You know, when it was just a little skinny It's probably only like 2 inches or so. When it was just a little skinny, well, the actual plant is probably just an inch tall. When it was just a little skinny little keiki. And I took it off because the mother plant wasn't doing well. Unfortunately, I haven't had a whole lot of success with keeping Dendrobium nobilis in my environment anyway. So I took it off, just in an attempt to save the keiki, and just with the extra moisture in the air and in the medium, this keiki has gotten a little fat. You can see it's a little fatty, and that's from being able to make nutrients to store in its in this cane from the light that I've provided it. So that's kind of cool. Here is one that I actually have had for a year, and it was another little keiki that actually was barely surviving. This plant was infested with mealybugs, and the mother plant was dying. So I took this little keiki off, and the original is this little guy over here. And then this year it sprouted this guy. Whoops. And so that's kind of cool. And if you can see down at the base here, there's a little new cane that's growing right there. So, and I've experimented with different medium. This one has some bark chips, some fine bark chips, and some sphagnum moss mix. So it's a little drier than just the pure sphagnum moss that I use for some of the newer ones. Of course, the sphagnum moss and the newer ones, I don't soak them totally, or if I soak them, I let them dry out outside. I was going to talk about my container here as well, but so I've got most of them in here. The ones that I put in there, I don't let the medium stay soggy. If I've soaked the plant, I let it dry out outside first before I put it in there, just so that it's not like waterlogged. The medium is just, if it's sphagnum moss, it's just damp, not like logged with water. Not even damp, really just, you can just kind of feel that it's a little wet. This one here actually is from a year ago as well. And it was actually initially just this little nub in here. This guy is probably about an inch tall. And then I had him outside in this container. As you can see, it's a little older than the other ones. And this one has a little bit of sphagnum moss outside, but the bark chips inside, deeper underneath. And it actually did pretty well. It grew this guy. And, this guy has gotten pretty fat. So I'm thinking next year it's probably going to grow another one, or maybe even this winter, now that I have it in here under these bright lights. So they're kind of making their way there. Here's another one. This one is actually from last year as well. And as you can see, this one is in bark chips mostly, and it's growing all these roots. And so actually, as they get bigger, I transfer them from these little shot glasses to these little bit bigger plastic cups, and using the same method. I think at some point when they're old enough to where, or big enough and have a big enough root system to where I can, I'm not as worried about them getting dry too quickly. I'm actually going to put them in regular containers that have drainage at the bottom. I've worried in the past that that it would be too wet and the roots would rot, but that actually hasn't been the case. And that's probably partly from having these holes that allow the water to drain out and then also allow the roots to breathe. So that's pretty important. Here's another one that I actually just put in a couple of weeks ago again. And yeah, as you can see, this guy's getting fat. He wasn't this fat a couple of weeks ago. And this one I've actually just put in sphagnum moss. Back in the old days when I first started, you know, I didn't have very good success with sphagnum moss either, you know, but I believe I've figured out why. Mostly because I probably packed them in too tightly and did not have drainage holes, or did not have breathing holes. So, you know, I thought I would just use sphagnum moss this time until the plants are bigger and have a good root system. Then I can transfer over to bark. And one good thing is the bark chips that I use here, they're fine. I actually bought these at Petco, the pet store, and I'm just using the reptile bark. Reptibark is what it's called. And it actually works pretty well. I've used it on some of my bigger orchids as well. They have like a lot of tannins and oils because it's like fir bark. So the oil from the bark kind of leaches out when you first water them, but it doesn't seem to bother the plants. Which makes sense because they grow on these trees. Well, maybe not firs specifically, but they do grow on trees that have similar things. And I've kept them in them for a year now, and they've done pretty well. These guys, these Potinara, when I bought them, they were really tiny a year ago. Probably about the size of some of the keikis that I showed you earlier. But this year, well, so originally, you know, you can see here, the original plants are here. They were probably about this size. And then, you know, these are the new growths. They've grown these new pseudobulbs. They're getting bigger. And probably next year, they will, you know, get even bigger. So this method seems to work pretty well for these guys as well. You can see some of the roots in here. You know, they're relatively healthy. You know, and when I keep it like this, I usually water about once a week. It keeps them moist enough to where they don't dry out, and they've done pretty well. I've kept them outside all during the warm weather, and then I brought them in. So anyway, oh, here's just a shot of this container. It's just a big plastic container that I bought, storage container that I bought from Walmart, and I put some holes in it. You know, I figured this is kind of like, you know, it would keep the air in here more humid. This is how I give them more humidity so that they don't dry out so fast, and you know, allows them to grow so that they don't dry. I have a piece of plexiglass on top to cover it. One thing I did find out was that initially a week ago, or about a week and a half ago to 2 weeks, when I first put these in here and planted them in these little cups, I had used these little bamboo stakes here. They're little bamboo skewers for shish kebabs. And as you can see, actually, when I was looking at it today to do this video, I noticed that they all had fungus growing on them. So look at this bamboo skewer here. It's got fungus growing on it. So I pulled them all out, you know, and I put them in there to help keep the plants upright. This guy here, I actually kept outside because, or not outside, but outside of this container because there was no more room. And so he doesn't have the fungus growing on him, but yeah, all the ones that were inside do. So I took them all out. And that's always the risk when you put them in containers like this, where they don't get good air circulation, and the air is humid, is that really good environment for growing fungus. So any part of the plant or any plant that has open wounds on it, you should not put in, you know, an environment like this, because it'll grow fungus. And actually, I had some of these guys, the ones that are a bit, actually all of these guys, I had them in smaller containers like this to begin with, just on a mat of sphagnum moss that I had put a little bit of water on, you know, and they actually grew pretty well. You know, none of the plants have open wounds, and so, or none of these keikis have open wounds, and so they, you know, have grown to this size. So, you know, I'm not worried about them getting fungus, but the bamboo skewers are actually, you know, plant material that's not alive, and so they've grown fungus, and so I'm getting rid of them. Most of these guys are pretty upright anyway, so I think they'll be okay. So anyway, this is my first YouTube video. Hopefully that's helpful to some people. You know, please leave comments and let me know if you've done anything similar, or if you have other methods that work well for you. I'd never seen anybody put up any videos about this particular subject, so I thought I would do this and share and see what people think. Alrighty, have a great day.